What you want to be is what you do.
I thought it went higher.
Oh, the chairs?
1 minute.
I'm gonna be a booster chair next time.
Already.
Merry Christmas, Bob.
Merry Christmas, man.
Yeah.
Is there a line outside and we just haven't opened the doors yet? There is.
I think the term workshop kind of everyone, ooh, okay.
Falls under the category we don't give a you know what.
Oh, the category is kind of like the closed door sessions, they never show up.
Those of us,
You know?
those of us that care.
I know. We need to get you an assigned chair, Bob.
Okay, I got 3
Bob,
o'clock,
Bob,
so
that-
I'm
that
gonna
one's
call
hot
the
and
meeting
wired.
to order. And if you have one of these devices, please turn it to silent. We would appreciate that, and we'll start with Pledge of the Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And if there's anybody in the audience that wants to speak on an agenda item, we'll get to it in about a half hour, but please turn in your request to speak. All right. That takes care of item 1. Item 2 is our working session. I'm going to turn that over to Doug.
Great. Thanks, Margaret. So the concept behind this working session today is really an opportunity for the supervisors to have some open discussion. It's very difficult for us to be able to have open discussion within our board meeting and even outside because of sunshine. So we're going to run through a test, kind of a test run today with a working session. We're probably going to scale it back to 30 minutes. The idea of a working session is for us to have some open discussion, some open dialogue. No decisions are made, no votes are presented. It is really just opportunity for us to openly discuss different items. So I opened up with this slide because it's just something for us to be thinking about as we continue to move forward. I think with our current board members, we're forward focused. We're looking at making changes, improving our district. And I put a little quote at the bottom. It says, to be the district we want to be, we have to stop being the district we are. And that typically means not stopping tomorrow, not stopping 6 months from now. It means stopping today and in transition to be an improved, better district. So our item for today that we're going to start with is going to be just the agenda. So I've got some feedback around what our agenda looks like, and if you can progress the slide. This is a snapshot of what our agenda looks like today. There are some potential opportunities for us to move some things around, even structure the agenda so our meetings are a little bit more efficient, they run a little smoother, and they align with maybe how some other government entities manage their meetings. So what I've done is, in this first exercise, what we're going to do is we're going to openly discuss opportunities for us to make some changes. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to adopt all these changes. What April and I have talked about, if the board's in agreement, is we do some things that we need to change immediately because it's in our best interest, and other things we will progressively change over time. So, April, if you want to go to slide 3, I listed some examples to start the conversation. So, what we want to do is we want to look at our current meeting agenda and just call out opportunities. For example, I listed 4 here. One is we need to split out any requests for approval items that appear in committee meetings and move them as actual approval items. A good example is PPAC will submit their committee report, and in there they may call out approval for the spending of X amount of dollars for X amount project. So what we want to do is anything that requires board approval, we want to pull it out of these committee reports and have it submitted as a standalone agenda item. It helps make things cleaner when we're voting, and it helps separate what we might consider consent type agenda items versus those that we need to vote on. The next one is just around administrative agenda. So we have a consent agenda and then business items. This is purely really just an opportunity for us to differentiate between what is consent and what would be an administrative agenda, and it's really business items. Some feedback that I've heard is with tabled items or old business, we tend to lose some sight of those. So if we don't take action and we table something, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to. The way we do it today is that item doesn't stay on the agenda until we close it. A recommendation would be either we create an old business and we keep those items, or we task that out to maybe the vice chair who's responsible for maintaining and keeping us up to date on items that would be considered tabled or old agenda. And feel free to jump in at any point. These are just some sample recommendations. Another item that's come up is staff reports. So we have staff reports towards the bottom of the agenda. A lot of times we have our staff sitting around for an hour, sometimes even more, before they're even get a chance to speak. I think the opportunity is to move staff items up on the agenda so we can have them address their items, and then they could even leave after their portion. Another example is supervisor comments. So today we just have supervisor comments. I think we should change that to supervisor reports and comments, because I would like to see in the future that we have supervisors who are aligning themselves with certain projects, with certain streams of work, and it would give those supervisors an opportunity to update the board on particular items. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide.
Yeah, on that, I've got a question. I totally agree with that. In fact, I'd move that up to right after the pledge for one reason. We have people that sit out here for 3 hours to have to hear what either the board or a vendor or a professional says. We get them up front, and then they don't get the opportunity really to speak on a subject that they bring up that's not on the agenda. Let them go first, then let the public talk, and they can talk about any of those things that were brought up that may not be in the board book, or they brought up that was not implied. But going down to the staff reports, I like that idea on the supervisor, but if we're going to present something through a work group or whatever we want to call it, where one member is working with staff that's coming up with something, I would not like to be surprised at the meeting. I'd like to see under staff deal, we have the requirement to get what that report is going to be a week in advance, even if you don't have
Sure.
the deal. So we got an idea. I don't want to come in here and see a 5, 6, 7, 10-page report and then expect to speed read it.
Yeah.
I'd much rather have that in
Yeah.
advance if it's at all possible.
Yeah, and I don't think that's intended to take away any items that the staff is working on. It's more of an opportunity for.
Well, my other reason for doing it is that I believe if we have that then on the agenda identified, we can maybe take some action on it.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's just buried under supervisor comment and the supervisor brings it up, it's not on the board book at all. Nobody even knows that there's going to be a discussion of,
Yeah.
let's say, connection fees or changing assessment methodology.
Which brings
It wastes time.
Yeah, which brings me to another. If you can go to slide 5, and we can continue to provide input. But there's a thought process around our meetings. So we have 2 meetings a month. The one recommendation is to kind of split up the meetings and how we proceed with them. So let's call, and this is just purely just an option. So we make the changes to the agenda as far as moving staff items up, making certain changes. But we can have a meeting 1, which is the first meeting of the month, is really our action meeting. It is really focused on things that we're approving. The staff reports, unless there's something critical, we would move the majority of the committee reports and even some of the staff reports to the second meeting of the month. And the purpose for that is that second meeting of the month becomes more of a non-action meeting. This is where if we like the working sessions, because I still think we need these opportunities to have open discussion, we can have a working session during the second meeting of the month. We have our committee meetings, so it's more what I would consider non-approval items that fall in that second meeting of the month. Now, there's not a whole lot of change that needs to happen here. It's really April or staff working with Severn Trent on putting the agenda items together and putting more of our proposals, presentations in that second meeting of the month, and putting our action items that is board approval in the first meeting. Doesn't mean we don't have any staff reports. It just, let's try to put all the approval in the first meeting if we can, and leave the proposals, presentations, things that are non-action oriented in the second meeting.
I've worked with a lot of communities that tried that, and I have no problem with that, but I think it needs to be flexible enough, because when you start getting into construction projects, you're not going to, you delay a contractor 30 days, it's going to cost you money.
I agree with it.
So
but
it's going to
I
have
agree
some
with it.
flexibility
And
to
it would.
do that.
This is purely just this recommendation is purely best practice. It would be,
You can try it.
in the event that we are scheduling, we want to try to put proposals, presentations in the second meeting of the month, so it doesn't derail from our approvals.
Yeah.
Yes, Kathleen?
Oh, thank you. I'd like to separate business items. I would like new and old separate.
New and old?
I agree.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think
I
that's
agree.
that would be a better approach.
And what I was thinking, even with old business, that is something that, in order to not lose sight of it, we keep it on the agenda, and it could even be something that the vice chair could, if there's any takeaways.
We have
or
a parking
anything,
lot.
Or assign it out to either back to staff or to a supervisor. But I like old business is one of the recommendations, so we can split that up if everyone agrees.
Yeah, we've got stuff that's just fallen through the cracks that I haven't heard discussed in here for 8 months, that I know is on the table. And it's just gotten lost because we don't have an old business section.
Give me a suggestion or an idea of what you're talking about.
DMS's contract.
DMS?
Hmm?
Our issue with Yvonne. Whatever happened to that?
You have to talk to the attorney about
Yeah,
that.
so just
It's a
wanted to
parking
get
lot
to the
item.
state
That's what I'm
attorney's
talking about.
office,
We
yeah.
need to know where those, and I can think of some
Any
more.
item
but-
that comes through on the agenda that is on the agenda that doesn't get approved, that doesn't get taken off, should stay on.
Yes, I agree.
Are we talking about table items?
Yes.
And also
Yes.
things that are kind of like a work in progress. I was thinking of the bathymetrics on the lakes, because we had approved one portion of them, and with the idea that when we got that information, we might go ahead and do the next grouping. And it's been months and months and months since there's even been an update on it.
Well, I'm not so sure that the agenda is the appropriate place to hold those items. I think
Sure, because I know
potentially
you're
we
talking
would
about it.
have a lot more feedback and updates just from the reorg ideas as well, just because we would have momentum on each one of those projects to be able to keep the supervisors updated. But that's something that we can discuss. One of the things that we had discussed is the green sheet. You want me to pass that out?
Yes.
Because that, on the green sheet, is tabled items.
What are you
and/or
looking
other.
at?
So we have an idea. we have a
Go
way
to slide
document
6. So, with the county and other entities, they have anything that is brought to the board for approval, that needs a vote, has to be submitted or documented on a green sheet.
This is just a sample.
The
of
whole
what we use
purpose
in
is,
fire department.
the whole purpose is just so we've got a sheet of paper that documents what is the action, what is the vote, and the outcome. And we put that, I guess, we put in a binder so we can always track back to everything that was approved. It's just a little easier method for us to document when things are approved.
And who's gonna do all this?
This would be the business manager.
Well, this would just be in lieu of, so right now, we're preparing this cover sheet for action items. It would just be in lieu of this document. It's just changing the format of this document from a memorandum form to that. That's as simple as it is. It's just organizing it. It tells you, what the action is specifically that you're voting on, why it's necessary, whether it's a statutory requirement, whether it's a policy requirement that you approve this, different program areas, and then also at the bottom, you can fix it to where, you can make it to where you decide who is reviewing your documentation as far as staff, your managers, your legal, and then as far as the action, it's recorded on the actual document. And basically, there would be an original master document kept in a binder, and I would probably sit here and flip through, and as you approve those items, I would circle those approved, and that becomes your master record as far as what actions were taken by the board at that board meeting.
Would there be attached to this a motion or a resolution?
If there was one
Right
for
here.
that item. yes.
Anything
Any
that-
Because otherwise,
supporting
what does this
document-
accomplish?
All of your supporting documentation would be attached.
Okay, time out. What is the advantage of having another piece of paper when we were trying to get away from paper 2 years ago by having the computer? But I don't understand the advantage.
Well, it wouldn't be another piece of paper, it would just be in lieu of this piece of paper.
Okay, so what's the advantage?
It has more information on it that we're capturing, as far as your motion and why it's coming before the board.
Then what's going to appear in the minutes for approval at the next meeting after something?
Well, the minutes wouldn't change, it's just then we would have as far as payment approvals and actually being able to provide support of what the board approved, I wouldn't have to go back to the minutes for everything to actually provide documentation of board approval.
Kathleen, you had,
I have two things. Anything that was tabled, I would like to see on the agenda next time around. I do like this, I've been at boards where we had papers with motions. However, the motion needs to be adjusted, in my opinion. The motion should be there so that it's stated exactly and the vote exactly how it went.
To have each of your names listed out.
Yeah.
Right, and
Yeah.
it should be, this, because have used these before, it just needs some adjustment, I think. This isn't exactly how that
Right, so
would-
this is a consent agenda example, and so on the consent agenda, it's things that are more routine and doesn't really elevate to the need of documenting each supervisor's independent votes, but your administrative agendas probably should, and they would have, it would be outlined, each supervisor name, and then checked off whether it was yea or nay. That's what you're talking about?
Well, that and the motion itself should be put on this paper.
It
as-
is. The action requested would be the actual motion.
That would be, say, what the motion is.
and if there was a motion that, so if there was something for approval, it would be, we would come to the meeting with the green sheet that had what was being asked to be approved. So they would have basically just a pre-populated sheet. If there was a motion that came as a part of the board, then it would be a fill-in.
But
right.
sorry. But on the motion, there would be a person who makes the motion in the second.
Yeah.
That would be all on this paper, correct?
And exactly the motion as it's recorded.
Right.
We could put whatever you want.
Yeah, well,
on there.
that's, like I said, I've used these before, and that usually is, and, you don't have to have individual names, but it has to say the vote was, and if the vote was unanimous, they can ask to vote, the chair could ask, or somebody could ask, if we could say it was unanimous.
Yes.
One approach I've seen at the risk of getting involved in policies, some boards will have at the tail end, and you can put it anywhere you want in the agenda packet, what's called active action and agenda items. And it will list action, indicate who has to do what, and give a status, whether it's completed or ongoing. And that's one way to track items that have been tabled or
You
continued
said
also.
in lieu of old business.
Right, I mean, that could be under the old business category, have a listing of all these action items.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And give the status.
That's what I was looking for.
And
That's what we want, whether
That's
it's
what we want.
Something
tabled
like this.
or whether there's, additional due diligence and who it's assigned to. I just think we need more visibility into those things so they don't fall off. April, can you go back to number 4? So let's sum this up. So if everyone's in agreement, any requests that come through the committee that need approval needs to be submitted as an agenda item separate from the committee report. So that's one action. 2, the recommendation is to move staff reports up. I heard Ed recommend to put that after the pledge before public comment. Any issues with that?
Yeah, just like a month ago, we had a vendor sit here for 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
To me, that's not right. Get them in, get them out.
Okay.
And the same thing with our professionals. If they don't need to be here all day, let them go. Let them go. Saves us money.
And go ahead, Mark. You gonna say something?
And I wanted to get clarification on that, because I don't think they're charging us by the hour when they're here in our meetings.
I don't know what the deal
At least that
is.
was my understanding. Tyler, are you charging us by the hour when you're here?
Not every time, no. For the record, I'm Tyler Wainwright with Tetra Tech. No, it depends. I mean, times like today where we're sitting here and we're not going to say anything for 30 minutes, I'm not billing you guys for that. So it depends.
My thing is 30 minutes is one thing, but we've gone 3 hours.
Well,
It's ridiculous.
We've got staff that's been here all day.
It's ridiculous.
You know, I would much rather them say
Before-
what they got to do.
Before you go on, I had sent out to quite a few people as part of the election deal, so I wasn't illegal on anything, of items that I saw. One of them is governance, is changing over to Robert's Rules of Order. Right now, we have a prohibition of Robert's Rules of Order. It goes back to 2007. Think about that.
I've tried to do that on 2 previous occasions.
Well, you got a comrade this time.
Well,
Second one, all supervisors to have input as to agenda topics. Typically, what I've seen is that the chairman will put together, working with staff, what believed to be an agenda, get that out to everybody for a couple hours at least, to know that we can look and add and send back through the operations staff. I'd like to see this added. What's this about?
Yeah,
type of
and-
thing. So that everybody is involved in this.
Well, and that's where the change to supervisor report and comments really comes into play towards the end of the meeting. It's an opportunity for the chairman to say, you know, to give us updates. And here's a few, you know, here's items that we're looking at for our next meeting. It could be an opportunity for someone to say, hey, you know, I'd really like to see this agenda item come up. So it gives us a little bit more input as, you know, supervisors sitting at this table on what's going to be presented at the next meeting.
aren't you gonna have lots of trouble with that in the legal requirements for the agenda to be on the website a week before?
Well, if Margaret and whoever's the district manager is working on the agenda, let's say Monday or Tuesday at 5 o'clock, send it out to everybody to either consent, or if they don't call back, then they've consented. But if they want to have an opportunity to add a subject that they know is coming on that you might not know about, or staff may not know about, we need to get that on there, or have the opportunity to get that on there. All of this gets back to another item. We're right now operating, I don't know that we're supposed to be operating under these rules that were passed by that board in January 2008. And they are strenuous rules of things that, to me, they need to be re-looked at. One of them is I'd like to see is allow 2 or more supervisors to be able to call a special meeting. Another item that I'll talk about. Change the meeting agenda, we talked about that one. Add old and new business. Limit items to be placed on the consent agenda to where anything is a controversial topic and/or needs sunshine and transparency, it does not go on the consent agenda. Certainly no more contract amendments like were pulled 4 or 5 months ago.
And the question is too, in that regard, do we, for committee reports, why do we have to approve those?
Because they often have items in them that need board approval.
Well, and that's what-
That's the
why
part
you're
he was
trying to
segregating, I
separate out
think.
Earlier.
Yeah, so I think we can solve that problem with anything that needs board approval. Let's say PPAC, for example, if there's something, they would submit it as a standalone item, and you'd have your committee report. We really wouldn't have to review them during the board meetings. They would be offered, but I don't know if we need to go through it.
Then the other thing in the last one, and this one just drives me nuts, is reading these minutes. We are almost
I'm
like
sorry, doing what?
reading our
Read-
minutes.
reading?
Reading. It's almost like we're trying to create a quasi-transcript of the meeting. I don't see that with the TV, the audio and all of that, why can't we show a topic, show there was a discussion, end of subject. If somebody wants to come in, the tape is available, listen to it. Why do they sit there and try to rewrite all that stuff? It takes forever. It's not necessary, not in today's age.
You mean document the meetings?
Document it, yeah. We don't need all that in minutes. We don't need a transcript. We got
There
all the.
are various forms of minutes. They run from what's called summary minutes.
That's what I'm talking
Which have agenda item request approval of contract amendment 95-44, motion by Sam, second by Susie, approved by board. That's a summary. Then you get into full-blown transcript, which other like county commissions and a lot of city councils do. And this is sort of in between.
Yeah.
It's sort of it's sort of like the bottom 1/3 of what I see from minutes.
So do you
because-
think there's an opportunity for us to take our meeting minutes today and scale it back as the next phase? Just
The chapter of the statutes that I read just indicates there has to be minutes of what happened at the meeting. And that doesn't say that you have to have a word-for-word transcript.
correct.
And that's it. So we could really scale back. What I'm trying to do is save staff time
'Cause that's our
on
staff.
doing this. Somebody sitting there listening to this, I've done this before, and it's a pain in the, you know what?
Once again, you have a lot of flexibility as to the form of the minutes.
It's a waste of money.
And there's a different philosophy by every board as to how much they want to have out there to make it easier for the public to see or not.
And you can,
No, go, yeah, jump right in.
discussion, all you have to do is put discussion followed.
Yes.
And then that covers that too.
Yep. Like last week, 45 minutes with WCI on that issue. If you sit there and try to recap that, I halfway understood what they were talking about. I wouldn't even wanted to try to put that in minutes.
Okay.
Just
And get
indicate
it- and get
WC
it right.
Yeah, and WCI was here, made a presentation on X, Y, Z, that's the end of it. Be done with it. Somebody wants to hear it, listen to the tape.
And I don't-
Those were my comments on changes to modify, but the big one is, I think we need a rule change, because right now, we're supposed to be operating under that rule of 2008. I don't know, how many of you have even read it? It's about 6 or 7 pages long of how to run a business,
I think
this business.
October 2009, I think, was the last version of it.
You got a later version than I had.
Yeah.
But I think we need to look at that.
And if you want to
2000,
request
take it
that be brought forward for a next working session, we can do that. As far as each one of us adding to the agenda, kind of last minute, like you're asking, you're saying when we're working on the agenda on Tuesday or Wednesday.
Make it Monday, I don't care.
It would, well, it would be like with today's agenda that's very full. If 5 people wanted to add one more item to the agenda, it'd be.
It's opportunity, Margaret.
It's-
Give them the opportunity, and then you can always come back as chairman, or the staff can say, hey, the
Can't
ship's
get it
full.
in this week.
Ship's full.
Yeah.
We'll put it on for future,
But it might
for the
be
next
something
one.
that you want to knock something else out of if it's that important. That's my point.
That would be the kind of thing that, because the agenda has to be posted on Wednesday or Thursday, if you're telling them on Monday or Tuesday that we need to put this on the agenda and staff has to scramble at the last minute to work on it when they're already working on other
All that's
stuff.
doing is going to item, if it's a new business, you got A, B, C, D, E, you now have F. It isn't going to take 30 seconds.
So we,
I think you're,